So we have a variety of paints to use. We have tempera blocks that are a dry block of tempera paint, liquid tempera, which already has the water incorporated, and our watercolor paint. So we have small papers, again, just for you to practice or experiment. Some of these paints you are probably familiar with, but some of the brushes you may not be. So we want to kind of experiment with those. First off, I have a few different kinds of brushes, but I want to talk to you about brush care. You might notice that some of our brushes get to looking kind of rough. So we want to be careful that we're not rubbing them so hard that the bristles break off or that they get so fuzzy like this. We want our brushes to stay nice and smooth, and part of that is by dragging with the brush, and I'll show you what I mean in just a little bit. So with our tempera blocks, we need to get them wet, and even if it seems like not a lot of water or not a lot of paint is in there, you can pick up if you really touch on those blocks of paint. Ooh, very first thing, always write your name. So I'm going to put my name on, and don't forget your class, but flip it over so that your name is on the back and you don't cover it with paint. That would be the best. Now I'm going to go ahead and write my name on a couple because we're going to experiment. And then again, flip it over, put your name on the back. So like I said, I was picking up gently, so I'm not scrubbing too hard because I don't want those bristles to break. And then you can try large brushes. I'm going to rinse. Be sure to rinse your brush well, gently sweeping across the bottom of your water bucket. And we don't need to tap. We could just wipe, and then our paper towel is there to get the extra water out. So you could also use smaller brushes. So that's tempera block. We've used those, I think, most often. With liquid tempera, I have a variety of brushes for you to try. And if you're wondering, I have a little brush chart that kind of tells what, so fan brush is a really fun one. It could be used for hair, petals, fur. It gives good ideas. So we want to be really careful with our brushes. Here's one sizes of angle brushes. These long brushes are so nice for making like thin and thick lines, and I'll show you that in just a minute. So with our liquid paint, I want to make sure to just get paint on the bristles and not going up the handle. That's when we sometimes get mixing. I'm going to drag the brush, and notice that I pick up the paint and I can do a thin line with the tip of it, or a medium line, or a thick line. So kind of experiment with what you can do with those brushes. Again, when we rinse, we're just kind of gently going on the bottom of the water bucket, and then I'm going to dab it off. Ooh, I still had pink in there. So I'm going to rinse again. We want to make sure that's all clean so it doesn't go into the next color and get it dirty. We also want to get the dirty water. Sometimes I have students go directly from the water bucket and then into the paint, and then it starts getting our paints having colors swirled in it. So we don't want to put the dirty water into our paint color. I'm going to show you one of my favorite brushes, real thin. So I'm going to dip in, and again, I'm bracing my wrist and doing a thin line, or I can press down a little more and get a thick line. So kind of fun to play around with those. Again, we don't want to scrub or push because that's what breaks those bristles off. Last thing, you can mix. I have some mixing trays, which I forgot to bring over with me, but kind of scoop a little bit of the paint, never pour it. So we're going to scoop a little bit, and then I swipe it, rinse my brush, make sure it's clean and doesn't have dirty water on it. That's really important, mostly with just the liquid tempera. I'm going to get just a tiny bit of blue, and then I can swirl it in there and get a beautiful purple. So kind of experiment with that. Next up, I'm going to rinse my brush good. We don't want to leave our brushes in the water. That can be hard on brushes too, or bend their bristles. Next up, oh, one last thing. I was going to show you a fan brush. Do that in person. So our watercolors, I'll move on to the watercolors. I have special brushes for watercolor paints, different sizes again. So if you're doing little things, you want little brushes, big things, big brushes. A quick dip of the water into each of your paints, because watercolors need to have water. If the paint seems thick, it doesn't have enough water. If it seems really sticky, it doesn't have enough water. So I'm going to gently, these brushes hold more water in their bristles. That's why they are made for watercolor. Again, I can get thick and light if there's more water. If I don't get more water on my brush, I can continue to pick up paint and get darker color. I can use just the tip. Again, if I brace my arm and use just the tip of the brush, I can get thinner lines, or use a smaller watercolor brush. And if you put them next to each other, they'll bleed, those colors will bleed together, and you get some mixing. So it just depends if you want that or not. Again, you can probably do thin and thicker lines. Rinse brush, lay it over on the side. Last thing are our watercolor. There's a fourth station, so we're going to move from station to station. Watercolor crayons and oil pastels. So these are a special kind of oil pastel where you can draw something. We'll see how the crayons do. And then instead of actually filling the whole thing in, you could just put a little paint, or sorry, a little water on top of the color, and it fans it out like paint. If I go over it a lot, I kind of lose my original lines. If I go over it just a little bit, I can kind of keep those lines brighter. And again, your water, if one touches the other, they're going to bleed. All right, enjoy experimenting. Ooh, with the fan brush or little brushes like this, please don't scoop the paint. Those are really hard on the bristles if you're scooping the paint. So it should just be for dipping and doing your textures or your painting details. We want to practice today on keeping our colors clean. It's so fun to mix colors, but we don't want to do it in the shared containers. So experiment, keep the colors clean, and try to keep our brushes really nice.